get us started with this next session, which is the eSAS session on funding opportunities for early stage investigators, both in and out of the NIH. So we have two exciting panelists today to discuss how to make the most of these opportunities, Dr. Max Kelz from the University of Pennsylvania and Dr. Zuzana Justinova from the National Institutes of Health. Each will give a 15-minute presentation to the entire audience, and then what'll probably end up being a little bit after 2 p.m. some point, we'll break into 3 discussion groups as indicated on the agenda. And then you should be able to select the breakout group most relevant to your career stage for the question and answer period. And we'll explain a little bit more about that, I guess, when that time comes. So then, Max, if you want to start to load your slides or attempt to screen share, I'll do a nice introduction. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Max Kelz, who's the Anesthesia Distinguished Professor in the Department of Anesthesiology and Critical Care in the Perelman School of Medicine at the University of Pennsylvania. He's a physician scientist studying the neurobiology of unconsciousness and also serves as president of the FAER, Academy of Research Mentors in Anesthesiology. So he will be discussing mentored institutional and foundation grants. And go ahead and take it away, Max.
So hopefully you can see my slides now.
You're up and we can hear you.
Great. All right. Well, I'd like to thank the eSAS organizing committee for inviting me. I'm going to spend the next 15 minutes or so talking about finding your funding and really focusing in on the pre-K series stage of grants. I thought I would go over some disclosures. So since 2013, I've been a member of the ASA Committee on Research and have served on the FAER MRTG grant study section. I similarly have served on the IARS IMRA study section since 2014 through 2019 when I was elected to the Board of Trustees. I'm the PI on Penn's T32 grant, which is designed to provide postdoctoral research training for physicians interested in perioperative medicine. And then by way of disclosure conflicts, I have served on the advisory board of Spark Therapeutics. There's nothing in this talk that's relevant to that, and my presentation won't include any discussion of off-label or investigational products. In the next 10 minutes or so, what I hope you get from my talk is going to be some familiarity with the early career mentored research development opportunities. I'm going to try and help you identify the optimal source of funding for launching your career as a clinician scientist in anesthesiology, perioperative, or pain medicine. I'm going to try and emphasize the critical elements to enhance your competitiveness in applying for one of the Mentored Research Career Development Awards. So I'll start by covering institutional mentored grants. And essentially, for those of you new to the process, you may find that these grants sound like a bit of a word salad. After being in this game for about a quarter of century, I have to remind myself that all the letters and numbers do need some explanation. So I'm going to focus on the institutional T32 grant and talk about that as an early step. I'll then transition over to talking about the anesthesia community's foundation awards, and these come largely from FAER, which is the Foundation for Anesthesia Education and Research, or the IARS, which is the International Anesthesia Research Society. And each of our foundations has their own mentored research grant. I'll touch on the review criteria, and we'll talk about success rates in these proposals. Okay, so what I'm showing now is a map of the US, highlighting the departments that have T32 grants. Again, these are institutional training grants, which means rather than applying directly as an individual to, say, the NIH or to a foundation for support, you're applying for support from within a department where you may find yourself. I would love it if this map were covered from north to south and east to west in institutions that have T32 grants in anesthesiology. But within our field, there are 16 institutions that currently hold these mentored research training awards. And they range in the Northeast from the Harvard schools, which I believe have the largest collection with about 10 spots. As we move down the Northeast, Yale, Columbia, Penn, Hopkins, and Duke all have T32s. Moving west, SUNY Buffalo and Pittsburgh have them, as well as Michigan, the Medical College of Wisconsin, Vanderbilt, WashU. Then we jump to the West Coast, where the University of Washington in Seattle, UCSF, Stanford, and UCSD complete the 16 programs. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to be at one of those 16 institutions to launch your career. There are many fine departments of anesthesiology, critical care, perioperative, and pain medicine across the country where there is support and help. But at these 16 programs, there are pre-specified paths and tracks to help you make that transition. Okay, so to be eligible for a T32 spot, you have to be a US citizen or permanent resident. And you have to be enrolled in a research program, in a clinical doctorate or postdoctoral program. The T32 grant does provide salary support. This is traditionally at the NIH corresponding wage scale. And it expects that you will have 20% time dedicated, 80% time dedicated to research. What that means, what most of us do with these programs, especially if you're a clinician scientist, is that we allow 20% time for you to maintain your clinical skills as an attending anesthesiologist while spending 80% time developing the science that you're most passionate about. Trainees can request up to 3 years of funding on the institutional's T32 grant. And that's something that some of our developing early stage investigators will seek. In anesthesiology, we're lucky in that these 16 programs are largely designed to help clinicians pursuing research. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to have an MD. About a third of the T32s will also provide funding for PhDs interested in anesthesia research sciences. But the trend over the last decade or so has really been to support the decreasing number of clinicians interested in pursuing a primary research career in anesthesiology. And that's what many of the T32s are set up to cover in anesthesiology. And these grants can provide you with an outstanding opportunity to either launch your research career or to reboot your science if, say, you've already established an interest and then spent several years either completing medical school or residency training. So while it's most common to jump on a T32 after residency, you will find that some individuals may spend time on that T32 grant before they start their anesthesiology residency. In addition to the T32 institutional awards, I'm going to touch on FAER and IARS. They also have mentored research training grants. A key difference for eligibility for FAER is that FAER grantees going for the MRTG need a commitment from their department to be on the faculty. And to remain eligible, they have to have completed their residency or fellowship training within the past 10 years. For FAER, there are 2 sets of application deadlines in February and in August. The FAER MRTG grants are 2 years long. They will mandate 75% of your effort be dedicated to research. The award provides $250,000 given over 2 years and is really a wonderful way to help you launch your career. By additional way of disclosure, the FAER MRTG was really my first grant as I sought to launch my own career, and really was fantastic. And I think many of the eSAS community, some of the older members, can talk about either their experiences as a FAER MRTG or an IARS IMRA awardee. I'm going to say this here. I'll wind up closing my presentation with the same point, but the 10-year success rate is really incredible. So 30% of those that submit a FAER MRTG grant will be successful on the first try. And in the interest of remaining persistent, when we look at the numbers that Jim Eisenack has compiled over the past 10 years, those that maintain their desire and their willingness to resubmit incorporating reviewer comments will ultimately have about a 43% success rate on their FAER MRTGs. IARS has a similar mentored research award opportunity. The eligibility requirements for the IARS are also outstanding. They're a little less strict than FAER. So for the IARS, you really just have to be a member of the society who is not yet converted to independent NIH R01 level funding. And you must have completed your core anesthesiology training within the past 10 years. Unlike for FAER, the IARS has a single deadline every year towards the end of April. The IARS puts out their 2-year IMRA grant. It requires only 45% effort, and it pays $175,000 over 2 years. The IARS IMRA is a grant that's been around for 8 years. What you tend to find is that the applicant pool, if you're an aspiring eSAS member or an aspiring clinician scientist, most folks will apply both to a FAER MRTG and to the IARS IMRA award. So the denominator of applicants is pretty much the same for both. But the IARS has fewer awards, which leads to a smaller success rate of 12% on the first try and 14% overall. When we start to think about the essentials for the Mentored Research Training Awards, regardless of whether they're for FAER, for the IARS, or ultimately for the NIH, say in the K-Series award, these are the essential components that get scored. Reviewers are going to want to know about you as the applicant, also known as the principal investigator. We're going to want to know about your career goals and objectives, your development plan, how you're going to be mentored. Going to want to know about the science you plan to do. We're going to want to know about the mentor or mentors who are helping you to make that transition. We're going to want to know about the environment in which you're working. And I'll finish with a closing bit on budget for the Mentored Awards. But let's first talk about the principal investigator, and that's you as the applicant. You have to remember that unlike the independent awards, where really you're being scored as a PI and your science is the main focus, that these mentored research components have additional aspects, and I'm going to touch on them in turn. So we want to know about your potential to develop as an independent and productive researcher. Some of the best predictors for this variable is really, what have you done as a trainee? Have you established a record of scholarship? Have you achieved peer-reviewed publications or not? And if not, then perhaps using a mechanism like a T32 to help you build that record of scholarship can be a really useful step. We're going to want to know more about the letters of reference that your mentors and those that interact with you will write, and especially their thoughts on your potential for eventual independence. As we talk about additional components of those mentored awards, we tend to think about things like your career goals and objectives, what your prior research training is. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to have had a PhD or even a master's degree program, but when these mentored awards are reviewed, we want to see that you're going to get those skills that become important for developing your science. And maybe that's additional formal training in a master's program or in a PhD program. We want to know that you're taking advantage of the resources that are available at your institution, that your plans include rigorous training with your mentor, that you're meeting regularly, and that mentor is establishing clearly elaborated milestones for you to continue on your pace to meet the mark towards eventual independence. Now, let's talk a little bit about the science that you propose to do. The underlying research plan should have a strong scientific premise, should incorporate innovation, either in terms of the hypotheses or concepts that you hope to test, or in terms of the methodology that you use to help advance your science. We want to make sure that that research proposal has a significant question that's being addressed, and that you're using appropriate statistical rigor to evaluate your studies. It's important that you propose a robust and unbiased design, and that the results that you generate, that the plan for getting to those results are feasible and have a high likelihood of producing important knowledge, whether you prove or ultimately disprove your hypothesis. When you think about finding that mentor, we've heard some excellent talks this morning about mentorship and the importance of mentors. For these grants, it's critical that your mentor be an independently funded investigator who's already made that transition. This doesn't mean that you can't work with an exciting junior faculty member who may him or herself be striving towards independence, but that individual would be best suited as part of the mentorship team rather than serving as the primary mentor. So it's critically important that you align yourself with someone who's made that transition to independent funding. We want to hear from that mentor and your mentorship team about your strengths as an individual, the areas for you to grow. We want to know about how the mentor will help facilitate your growth and development as a principal investigator, and that mentor is going to describe the opportunities that you'll have for career development. I think also critically important is the notion that your mentor will have a track record of fostering the development of other similar trainees as those clinician scientists or scientists make their way towards independence. If we think about the environment in which you're training, that's another critical component. Maybe you're in an outstanding institution that has a track record of conducting big multi-center clinical trials, and that there are programs designed to enhance your ability to grow as a trialist. We want to see that as you build that training program, you incorporate those key methods. Maybe you're in an institution where the basic sciences are incredibly strong, where there are centers for genomics, where there's all kinds of opportunities for you to grow. It doesn't really matter what your science is, but we want to see that you are gaining essential experience and capitalizing on those key strengths that exist in your institution. We want to see also that that your chair letter and that these other letters talk about how you're going to capitalize on the resources as you strive towards independence. And lastly, I'll just touch on the budget and remind you that these are mentored awards. And so asking for, say, funding for a postdoc is not appropriate for these mentored awards. We want to see that you as an individual are benefiting from the training, and that you're getting your hands in the thick of it, learning the key skills, experiments, methodology that you'll need to continue as a clinician scientist. We also like to see that the department that you're in is providing substantial resources, that they're investing in you in the same way you're investing in yourself. And I think I'll stop by showing you some photos of the successful recent FAER and IARS mentored awardees. I'll again remind you that these grants are really critical. They provide early career support and development for you to make that transition towards independence. And so I'll look forward to seeing your questions and meeting many of you who are at this stage as you strive for mentored training. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Justinova, and thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Max. That was great. While we're transitioning screens, I'll introduce our next speaker. So Dr. Zuzana Justinova is a program director in the Division for Research Capacity Building in the National Institute of General Medical Sciences. Among other duties at the NIH, she manages research and training grants in the area of anesthesiology and perioperative pain. And probably like some others on the meeting, she serves as the program official on my grant. So her talk will focus on the topic that I'm sure many of us are keenly interested in, applying for, getting, and then renewing NIH grants. And I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. And go ahead and take it away, Zuzana.
Hello, Keith. Thank you for a nice introduction. I hope you can see my slides.
Yeah, slides are up and we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you to the organizer for inviting me, and thank you all for tuning in on a Saturday. And I was invited to talk about K and R level grants at NIH. So first, disclosures. I have no financial relationships to disclose, and I will not discuss off-label or investigational use of any drugs. After this talk, you should be more familiar with career development awards and research grants available to early stage investigators at NIH. This will all be with emphasis on NIGMS, and you should better understand the process of applying to NIH for support. This is the outline of my talk. Because of the short time, I will not be able to dive very deeply into these topics, but I will strive to give you the most relevant information. Okay, I would like to briefly introduce NIGMS, which is National Institute of General Medical Sciences, is one of the 27 institutes and centers that form NIH. As you know, institutes have different missions, responsibilities, and constituencies, and all of them support basic research that is relevant to the diseases or organ systems, stages of life, populations that are within their mission areas. In contrast, NIGMS supports fundamental research that does not focus on those specific areas. We mainly support basic research that increases understanding of biological processes and lays the foundation for advances in disease diagnosis, treatment, and prevention. Aside from the basic research, NIGMS also supports several specific clinical areas that affect multiple organ systems. And I wanted to mention that NIGMS has the largest training portfolio in NIH, and we are very committed to enhancing the diversity of the scientific workforce and also developing research capacity in the states that were historically underfunded by NIH. That's through the IDEA program that you may have heard of. Okay. Anesthesiology and perioperative pain portfolio that are managed at NIGMS is housed in the Division of Pharmacology, Physiology, and Biological Chemistry. And focus of this portfolio is to support studies on mechanisms and systemic effects of anesthesia. This includes general, regional, and local anesthetics. There is also a big area of perioperative pain, transition from acute to chronic pain. We have also studies on consciousness related to anesthesia, and also some studies deal with sedation in intensive care settings. I quickly wanted to mention that we have several specific areas we also cover, and we have a portfolio, actually several portfolios that go under, that belong under clinical pharmacology. We have a critical illness and injury portfolio that focus on research or total body response to trauma, like burn, surgery, and injury in general. We have a sepsis portfolio, and we also have a wound healing portfolio. So these are the clinical areas that we cover. Okay. And NIH is very committed to early stage investigators, and NIGMS takes this commitment very seriously. We created the ESI Mira opportunity that I will mention later, and this contributes, this funding opportunity contributes to the high rates of success of early stage investigators at our institute. Since NIH has definition for everything, early stage investigator early stage investigators are researchers within 10 years of receiving terminal degree or finishing their clinical training. We have a definition for new investigator, and these researchers have no record of significant independent support for NIH. These designations are important because during review, the ESI NI applications are typically clustered and reviewed together. It also plays an important role during funding decisions that we make, because we consider the stage, career stage of the investigators, and we really strive to provide funding to as many as we can. And as NIGMS doesn't really have a strict pay line, we are often able to reach for applications that scored a bit higher, sometimes on the grounds that this is from a early stage investigator, sometimes new investigator as well. That designation doesn't get as much consideration because these investigators might be much later in their careers. There are different reasons why they never had significant independent support. So we evaluate really those on case-by-case basis. When you're applying to NIH, it's really important to find the right institute for your research and the right funding opportunity. And all this requires preparation, a lot of information searching. I wanted to point here that not all research that anesthesiologists do belongs actually to NIGMS, because we have overlap, for example, in areas of pain with NINDS. With NINDS, we also overlap in the consciousness research, with pain also with NIDA. Research on delirium and postoperative cognitive decline belongs to NIH, which is National Institute of Aging. And if the research focuses mainly on cardiovascular system, it should go to NHLBI, National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. So it's really important to review websites of institutes that you think your research might belong to, because they spell out the missions, priorities, goals, and funding strategies. So it's really helpful to do your homework. And it's very important to identify the right funding opportunity announcement. Not all ICs are signed on all FOAs. So you really have to look and don't expect that because this is an opportunity. Every institute has to accept applications for it. No, it's listed there, and you have to pick the right one. Since I don't have time to really talk much about FOAs, one thing I wanted to stress out is that you should pay attention to the review information section of the FOA, because it lists the criteria that will be evaluated in the review meetings. It really gives you clues what should be covered in the applications, and researchers sometimes forget that. There are these questions that the reviewers will answer for, and it's very important to be familiar with them. Okay, I am getting to the Career Development Awards, or K Awards. These awards provide scholars with protected time to conduct research and career development activities leading to independent research careers. There are several types of K Awards that are designed for different scientific backgrounds and career stages. I'll be talking about mentored K Awards, which are for early stage investigators that need mentored research training. There are also non-mentored K Awards, and those are meant for independent investigators that would like to, for example, acquire new research skills. There are also institutional K Awards that are awarded to institutions to support multiple K-level scholars. As I said, different institutes have different K programs and also requirements for these programs. For example, NIGMS only offers mentored K Awards. So that's what I would like to talk about. These are the ones that are offered through NIGMS. I want to stress again that the research proposed in these applications must be within scientific mission of NIGMS. NIH training website provides information on all career development awards. You can find it all there. Here, I just wanted to quickly characterize the ones that we offer. K25, they support career development of investigators with quantitative engineering backgrounds that is outside of biology and medicine, who would like to make a commitment to biomedical research. You are probably more interested in the K08 and K23. So K08 awards provide support to clinician scientists for intensive supervised research experience in the fields of biomedical and behavioral research. It can include translational research. K23 is for clinically trained professionals who made commitment to focus on patient-oriented research. in NIGMS, it's really, I have portfolio anesthesiologist on K08, some on K23. It really is about what type of research is supported. So K23 is exclusively for patient-oriented research, or can be a combination with lab research. K08 is research that is not patient-oriented. Finally, the K99 R00 awards, or Pathway to Independence awards, they have two phases, mentored and independent, and they are really intended to facilitate transition from postdoctoral research position to an independent research position with independent NIH funding. And this actually at an earlier stage than is the norm. I will not have time to talk about more deeply about these, so you will have to find information on our website. Okay, some important information. Who is eligible for these Mentored K awards? Investigators have to have doctoral degrees that are listed here. At NIGMS, the K08 and K23 are both intended for assistant professor level clinician scientists. And anesthesiologists often apply, at the end, their FAER or IARS mentored research awards, but not all of them have these awards. So it's at the stage of assistant professorship. Although recently I got some questions about possibly associate professor level investigators to apply. There has to be a really, justified need for further training. Why, this investigator who might be a clinical associate professor, never had any NIH support, is there maybe move from one different area? Really, there is a need for new mentored research training. Those are very rare, but I think it's possible, providing other requirements are met. I wanted to also point out that previous principal investigators on K awards or large RPGs like R01 are not eligible to apply for these awards. Typical duration of K awards is 3 to 5 years. They are non-renewable. They also require full-time appointment, and the candidate must devote a minimum of 75% of full-time professional effort, or 9 person months, to this award. Salary typically is covered 75 to 100,000 plus fringe. This may be IC dependent. So for these details, it's good to look at the particular FOA. It has IC specific instructions towards the end of the application and specific tables, which provide all this information on eligibility and level of support, specific contacts for the institute. Research support that you can get with these awards is about $50,000 in direct costs per year. Quickly about what we expect to see in the application. Application has to have candidate section where you describe candidate's background, career goals and objectives, and there has to be a career development plan. Research plan contains the research strategy that has to describe the significance of the research, innovation, what approach. For the K99 R00, there has to be a research plan for both of those phases. As I go, the underlined items are actually also review criteria, so I don't have to repeat them. The application also have plans and statements for mentors and commenters, letters of support from any collaborators or consultants, contributors, and there is a section on environment and institutional commitment to the candidate, which has to be strong and well described what the institution will provide to the candidate. There is also a section on training in the responsible conduct of research. As I said, these are the underlying items are review criteria. There are other additional review criteria like human subjects, inclusion, animal and biohazard that can affect the scores. And the additional review considerations that don't affect score but are discussed during the meetings are the training in responsible conduct of research, resource sharing plan, budget, so on. The appendix section, just a little warning that very few materials are allowable, so please read the instructions. And for mentored mentor awards, the reference letters are submitted separately to us. They are not part of the application. As I said, we offer K08s and K23s, but we don't participate at all FOAs or the parent FOAs that there are. For K08, we only participate in the one that's designated as clinical trial not allowed. And for K23, for 2, clinical trial required and clinical trial not allowed. We don't participate in those that are designated as BESH, basic experimental research in humans. So really, again, be careful you select the correct one. Here I would like to recommend that you become familiar with the NIH definition of clinical trial. We have a lot of great information and tools on the website because it is important for your application. You have to respond to a clinical trial specific FOA. And if you propose a clinical trial, there are additional review criteria for clinical trials that you have to address. And of course, eventually you will have to register and report your clinical trials to clinicaltrials.gov. So the definition of clinical trial by NIH is broad and covers more studies that you would normally expect. So it's really crucial to become familiar with what is actually considered clinical trial. Okay, so here a little quick overview of the common research funding opportunities at NIGMS. Again, research must be within our mission. And I would like to start with our flagship program, which is MIRA, or Maximizing Investigators Research Award. That's specific for the NIGMS, no other institutes have it. And it has 2 flavors. One is for ESIs, the other is for established investigators. It has special receipt dates, so be careful to look at those. What are the characteristics of this program? It's actually a program grant application. It does not, the research strategy part of the application is shorter than, for example, for R01, it's only 6 pages, and there are no specific aims. The idea with the MIRA is that the researcher proposes a program, but has a freedom to follow new leads, new ideas, you know, but has to stay within NIGMS mission, because there are no predetermined specific aims. The research strategy can be a challenge to prepare because it has a different structure in a sense that you really have to be succinct. You have to balance well too much, too little detail, and you have to cover background in the research area, key gaps, you know, that in our understanding, and challenges that you would like to address. You also have to cover recent progress of the PI. You typically concentrate on last 5 years. And the last part is the overview of future research plans. So it's not a lot of space. And this really requires good thinking and planning how you're gonna do it. And it's good to talk to program officer if you're not sure, you know, how to balance those. MIRA has a special requirement on the effort. It requires 51% of PI's research effort, not total professional research effort, like in case of K awards, but 51% of research effort. So the institutions have to provide confirmation what is actually PI's research effort, and PI has to devote more than 51% of that. We only accept single PI applications, and the budget that can be requested for ESI MIRAs is up to $250,000. It's a 5-year award, and it's supposed to cover all investigators' research within an NIGMS mission. So only few other grants from NIGMS are allowed, and they are defined by FOA, like, for example, big central grants or conference grants. So we would, by creating this program, we wanted to maximize investment of federal funding, but also reduce administrative burden for PIs and NIH. The applications are shorter. You know, you only have 1 RPPR to write, and when you renew, if you're successful and you renew, you get a 5-year award upon your renewal. I will talk about this with R01s. Review criteria are the typical ones, like significance, investigator, innovation, approach, and environment. environment, but it has the FOA spells out specific FOA-specific considerations. So it's important to read those so you know what the reviewers will look for. And here I want to stress that the ESI MIRAs have higher rates of success than ESI R01s. The last data that we published were from 2018, and it was a 37% success rate for MIRAs versus ESI R01. So the chances are very good when investigators apply for these. You are probably familiar with R01 Research Grants, which are for discrete circumscribed projects, and the period of award is up to 5 years. This is the classic type of application with 12-page research strategy, and for these, multiple PIs and institutions are allowed. Here, new and early stage investigator preferences apply during review and during funding decisions. And review criteria, again, are the classic ones: significance, investigator, innovation, approach, and environment. And it's important that the PI, when creating this application, really ask questions. What is, how important is this research and how feasible it is? Quickly mention specific NIGMS funding policies that you might not see at other institutes. We award R01s for 5 years only to ESIs. Upon renewal, we typically provide only 4-year grants. So that hence the advantage of MIRA, that with renewal you get another 5 years. We also look at investigators' level of support, and if the investigators have over $750,000 in direct cost of support, we have to present these applications to our council, who then provides concurrence. It doesn't mean people don't get funded. It's just a bit more scrutiny for these applications. We also routinely apply cost containment measures to the budget that are requested. Again, as I mentioned with the Mentor Awards, there are scored review criteria and then additional review criteria and review considerations. So it's important to look at those, because the additional review criteria like biohazards, inclusions, animals, and human subjects, all issues with those have to be resolved before we issue notice of award. So any problems there are dealt with during pre-award period. I wanted to mention a new type of R01 that was introduced last year, calling them cats, R01 by one famous NIH researcher. They are targeted to early stage investigators, have similar definition like typical R01s, but they are supporting early stage investigators that are making a change in their research direction. So this is a very specific feature. You actually have to make a change in the research direction and have to describe it and justify it, why you're applying for this type of R01. And there are no preliminary data allowed in the application. And IGMS does not participate in this funding opportunity because of our MIRA program. So you have to check the FOAs to see which IC is participating in. Just briefly about 2 other types of R awards that we offer is R21s. And again, an IGMS is special here. We are not signed on the parent R21 FOA. We have our own that is for exploratory research for technology development. And we have an R01 or called Technology R01 Companion. Just briefly, this is for support of innovative technologies, but again, for biomedical areas in an IGMS mission. It can be high risk, high impact research, and the R21 mechanism is typically for proof of concept, up to 2 years, $275,000, and they are not renewed. So we have an R01 companion. It is for the research that is about a bit further along and is working on a prototype or testing the prototype. We have great website with webinars and FAQs, so I recommend to look there for more details. And finally, R15 are our Academic Research Enhancement Awards, are small-scale research projects, and they are mostly for undergraduate-focused institutions. These applications must include a strong plan to engage undergraduates in primary research. General goal is to strengthen the research environment at the institution. The review criteria are the same as R01, but emphasis is different. Emphasis is in relation to the area program objectives. Okay, so I'm sorry that I'm running out of time, but this will be quick. We'll wrap up in a few more slides because I think this is important for the early stage investigators to really put in time to become familiar with the application process and give yourself a lot of time to prepare your first application. It's not easy. Don't think that in a month you can create a quality application. So this is like an example timeline of how your preparation to submit first application should be. Can be fairly long. Here I have 8 months. It's important to really assess the field, your resources, who are the competitors, what have they achieved, what are the gaps in the research, what would you like to address. It's important, if you're not sure if your research goes to certain institute, to consult with program staff. We are here to tell you, once you also have, let's say, some write-up of your specific aims, that's actually much easier for us to think, if your research really belongs to us when we have something in hand. Please line up mentors, colleagues who will be willing to read your application. Really give yourself time to get feedback, proofread it, and do everything you can to meet all institutional deadlines. Please submit as early as you can, but at least 2 days before the receipt date, because you do have 2-day viewing windows when you submit the application, in which if you detect anything missing, problem, you can reject it, correct it, submit again, but you have to do this by the due date again. So if you submit, or the application is submitted on the due date, you pretty much are forfeiting the viewing window, and then you can be in a big stress the next day when you find out that half biosketches are missing, that figures didn't show the way you wanted to. So please don't plan on submitting on the receipt date, at least 2 days before it. And quickly, there are different people at NIH. You communicate at different stages of your application. So during your preparation, program officers are the ones to contact. We are the stewards of the scientific area. We can tell you more about institutional priorities and so on. But once you submit the application, the person you can contact is scientific review officer until the summary statement is released. The scientific review officer organizes the study section, deal with, there are liaison between applicants and reviewers, and prepare summary statement. After summary statement is released, you go to the assigned program officer. You can always find this information on ERA Commons, who is your officer, who is your SRO, who is your grants management specialist, and you can discuss the summary statement, the next steps with the program director. Grants management specialists have the fiscal stewardship of the grants. Those are the ones to always contact about budgets, efforts, a lot of prior approvals. They also monitor the progress on grants. They always know what your unobligated balance is, and they are very knowledgeable in these areas. So if you ask program director about budgetary issues, chances are it will go to grant specialist anyway. So these are the main people to contact. And only quickly, what are the factors that determine funding? Of course, it's availability of funds, but also scientific merit. And as I mentioned, the pay lines vary among institutes, and we have a more liberal pay line, or actually we don't use a pay line, and we can reach for applications. So this is how also NIGMS maintains a high success rates for eSAS. And of course, there are programmatic considerations, but like influence or utility to community or research area, And we look at the portfolio balance, or sometimes to geographic sites, but not as much for these. Like we do that more for example, for IDEA program. We also look at the overall level of funding of Investigator, as I mentioned. Sorry, I went over time. Thank you so much for your attention. And if you need anything, I am here to help, and you can always contact me.
Thank you so much, Zuzana. No apologies necessary. Everyone's hungry to hear your insight, and from NIH program officers in general, to learn so much about what's the most powerful really opportunity out there for us, which can be complicated. And I think you did a really nice job in the short time of packing in all the relevant information.